As old as history itself, this craft of harvesting trees for the benefit of man. The first shelters man built were made of wood. The first words man wrote were written on wood paper produced by the Chinese 5,000 years ago. The logger, like the American cowboy, has always had a special place in the lore of the American West. From Paul Bunyan forward, the logger has typified independence and ruggedness. Nowhere in America is this more true than in the great forests of the Pacific Northwest and Alaska. Individuals with goals and vision have been the cornerstone of timber enterprises, both large and small. Such is the vision that took Silver Bay Logging Company from a one-rig, one-site operation to an enterprise that now operates over a 2,000-mile range, from Seattle through Ketchikan and Juneau, Gulf of Alaska, all the way to Kodiak. This is our story.
We started this company in Washington, actually, and the 3 kids that was with us then come up here to Alaska and this is where we end up at in this operation. And the company's grown just like the family have, and real proud of all of them.
Well, we was in the logging business in Washington, and he had got to where he was just building road, and they kept telling him that they didn't know whether they were going to keep him working or not, and so he'd heard about that they were looking for loggers up here, and so he came up, checked it out, and we finally moved up here. For a lot of years I met airplanes and unloaded freight, and it's been building ever since, just getting more equipment and more jobs, and we've ended up now with a mill after 25 years. We've tried to keep the children involved. I mean, when we first came up, JR took a job that no one else wanted to touch. It was logs that built up in a pen that they were so tight in there, most guys that did that type of work wouldn't touch, and he went out and took the job and did it himself. He was only 16, I think, at the time.
Dick Bueller started Silver Bay Logging. We started in Sitka. I believe it was 1972 or 73. I come up with Dick when he first started the company and Ten Hook for him. At the time when we started the company, he had just an old D6 Cat, a couple of dump trucks and an old shovel, and it's grown from that prospect to uncountable equipment. It's all stemmed from one man's perseverance, hard drive, honesty, and numerous gambles on whether we was going to make it work, but Dick has always made it come out well. I don't know how he does it. He's got more drive than I ever had in my whole life, but he's always found a workforce, kept us working. Matter of fact, sometimes kept us working longer than we'd like to, a lot of us.
Logging begins with penetrating the vast wilderness where few men have gone before. Roads must be built, and often in very forbidding terrain. The first step is clearing and grubbing the right-of-way. Usually a backhoe comes in and does the subgrading. In Alaska, building roads means drilling, blasting, and hauling the quarried rock for a roadbed. The muskeg that underlies most of the forest and coastal region of Alaska must be scraped off and a roadbed built up with borrowed rock. Trucks dump the rock one pile at a time. bulldozers spread the rock. And behold, a road. A road that will bear a great deal of traffic. In its vast domain with variable conditions and terrain and timber, Silver Bay applies every logging method from the old tried and true to state-of-the-art technology. In Kodiak, a faller buncher takes on a thick growth of spruce. This technique is more familiar in the south where trees are grown in rows on flat land, but it works here too. Steep, rugged terrain is logged with the high lead method. Here is a high lead grapple working from a mobile tower. These yarder towers require fewer crew. For this type of machine to operate properly, there has to be visibility and deflection. In other areas where the terrain is more rugged and steep, these power yarders can reach over the ravines and require less visibility. These high lead towers with choker setters working below can bring in several logs at one time. Typically, the tower yarder requires a crew of 7 per site, compared to 4 or a 5-man crew for a swing yarder. In restricted areas where environmental concerns dictate a light footprint, the logging helicopter is used. Silver Bay has one of the larger collections of helicopters dedicated to logging operations in the country. The primary workhorse is the Sikorsky S-61 and the S-54, commonly known as the Sky Crane. The Sky Crane is capable of pulling up to 18,000 pounds of timber out of the depths of the forest.
We build less roads now, and as the time goes on, they require more and more helicopter and selective cut and bringing logs without roads quite a long ways. And if we didn't do this helicopter logging, there'd be no way to get to about a third, maybe up to 50% of the wood. And some sales are completely helicopter logging.
All methods of logging bring the raw timber to a landing where the logs are processed. They are limbed and cut to length before being loaded onto trucks. Today, the industry is turning more to mechanizing with these trimmers. One of these machines can replace 2 cutters and does the work a lot smoother, safer, faster. It has a computer operating measuring device that cuts the logs, sizes them, and counts them. Logs are cut to preferred lengths depending on the diameter and the grade of the logs. In flat and small accessible sales, the shovel yarder, with a grapple, picks the fallen logs and swings them toward the road. From the road, these logs are then loaded onto trucks. These giant off-highway log trucks can haul up to 120,000 pounds of wood to the sorting yard. They are called off-highway trucks because they are wider and heavier than trucks allowed to operate on highways. From harvesting site to sorting yard can be a long, arduous, and tricky trip. Timber is a self-renewing resource. The native species of trees regenerate themselves in an endless cycle. Governmental regulation is designed to balance new growth with current harvest. This ensures that we will always have the trees to build our houses and to provide wood for thousands of other uses. Here at the sorting yard, the logs are separated by size, species, and length. Then they are trimmed and cut. There can be as many as 35 different sorts. The most common species we have in Alaska are cedar, hemlock, and spruce. Every species are sorted by length. Uniform length is very critical to export loads so as not to waste valuable space on cargo ships. After sorting, the logs are scaled and finally branded. The final step is bundling them for a water journey to a variety of destinations. There are two methods Silver Bay uses in placing the logs. The most common method is to push and slide the bundles directly into the water. In areas of high sensitivity, non-violent dump is used. This involves an A-frame. Air power crimpers are used to bundle the logs tightly together. This makes it easy to handle in tow and when lifting out of the water again. This gently cradles the logs and then lowers them into the body of water. Once logs are placed in the water, Silver Bay's Marine Division takes over. The Marine Division does two important jobs for the company. First is moving logs, some just a short distance, to waiting ships for export.
This is one of the 4100s that were picked bundles of logs out of the water, and that barge, we haul lots of logs on it. Something that we got 3 of, then we got 2 others that we do that. We've probably got more log barges and cranes that do that work than anybody in the country right now.
Sometimes the customers come with their own barges to pick up the logs. Other logs are towed in mammoth rafts to their destination, such as our Silver Bay mill in the city of Wrangell. The ability to move our logs at our convenience or according to our needs and schedule is vital to our overall success in Alaska. The second job is moving all the freight that keeps our camps from Ketchikan to Kodiak operating at full speed. Silver Bay is the only logging company in the country that has its own marine freight division. There were good reasons for starting the Marine Division.
We could never get our freight, we could never get our logs towed or moved, and so we got a lot more control over our parts, our fuel, and everything that we do, so we can operate a whole lot better with control of our freight.
Ever since the gold rush days in the Klondike, Seattle has been the logistical hub for Alaska-bound freight. So we're keeping up a fine tradition. 7 years ago, Silver Bay acquired a marshaling yard in Seattle that funnels freight from all over the country to our operations in Alaska. Freight for each camp is sorted here in Seattle and put in separate containers and dropped off on the return trip to the camps along the way. Typically, food, machinery, fuel, and even equipment like helicopters will pass through this yard.
We will be taking these to Alaska to our maintenance shop here pretty soon.
But mostly, we have heavy equipment like this tower and trimmer.
Yeah, this piece right here to my right is a Dinarco 3500 delimber, and that's what they look like when they're brand new before they get any dirt on them.
Typical of Silver Bay ingenuity, this freight yard also serves a double purpose. It's a shipping facility, but it's also a homemade dry dock used to maintain the tug and barges of the fleet. A tug coming to Seattle from Alaska in need of maintenance can get it right away here and be on its way north again.
It just worked out really good for us. Put her back in the water and skedaddle for Alaska.
Since we logged our first side near Sitka, we have worked in 35 locations. With camps and work sites that dot the Alaskan landscape from southeast to the Kodiak Islands, how do you coordinate the activities of an operation that is geographically larger than most countries of the world? Dick Buehler devised, and refined over the years, a complex system of communications including radio and satellite transmissions, with repeaters located strategically throughout southeast Alaska. This enables Silver Bay camps and numerous remote job sites to stay in close contact with one another.
Two that are ready to go, and shoot them over to Fort Bay, okay?
To keep the camp supplied and in contact, Silver Bay maintains a fleet of aircraft. There are helicopters, light fixed-wing planes, single and twin-engine, float planes, and an amphibian aircraft. In fact, Silver Bay's fleet is larger than some local airlines. There's a constant stream of air traffic to meet the requirements of living and working in areas far from the mainstream. To keep the air fleet flying safely, Silver Bay has its own FAA-certified maintenance facility capable of overhauling each aircraft. And parts for all the aircraft we have are kept handy right there in the warehouse.
We have spares on the shelf for almost everything we have.
Camps are virtually complete small villages. Silver Bay runs both floating camps and land camps. Because timber sales are getting smaller and smaller, the company has shifted towards more floating camps, which are highly mobile. They can be moved to and from locations quickly, 1 day to pull out and 3 days to set up again.
About 50% of our operation today is sitting on a floating camp.
Land camps are used on larger sites where we may stay for years to complete the harvest.
We do all the maintenance from light to heavy, overhaul everything we got. There's really nothing that we send out. We do all the maintenance work ourselves.
Silver Bay has concentrated on recruiting family men and women as employees and has moved away from the legendary rough and tumble logging camp. Silver Bay camps are quiet, family-oriented communities with regular state-certified schools offering a rounded education, recreational and social opportunities. As isolated as some of them can be, each camp has satellite television and phone service just like any community in the lower 48. It's a successful effort to make a sometimes forbidding land a little more livable for the employee and his family. Of course, kids always invent their own style of fun. A unique feature here is the chapel, one in every camp. Silver Bay camps are known for their good food. All of it has to be shipped in from the outside, but no expense is spared to handle the hungry man. It has long been known that a worker in an isolated atmosphere looks forward to meals as much as any other aspect of his existence. Here, the butcher, baker, cook, and salad maker cater to those needs and keep the employees well fed. When all is said and done, the logs that are harvested all end up in a mill, either a pulp mill or a sawmill. Silver Bay recently bought a sawmill in Wrangell, Alaska to process some of our logs from the National Forest sale. National Forest timber, by law, must be processed in-state. The logs must be turned into either lumber or chips. This mill in Wrangell employs 42 people and manufactures dimensional lumber up to 20 feet, export lumber, and chips. Nothing is wasted. Even the sawdust and bark are sold for garden or landscaping projects.
The Alaska timber is really old and has lots of defects, so we make lots of chips for pulp mills in the Canadian market. The balance of it is Highland hemlock and some spruce, and that goes into the high-grade wood. George Woodbury, he's the general manager of the mill now, and it's in charge of most everything that goes on here. I'll let him say a little bit about this thing.
The hemlock products that we're cutting are railroad ties and shop lumber, industrial wood. Once we get the lumber cut here in the mill, it's loaded on our barges out here on the dock and goes to our facility in Seattle. And there it's picked up by the customers and moved off to their facilities.
We can't work without people to start with, and you got to have good people, and we think we've got good people as a lot of our success. With the Lord's help, we got to contribute most of it to that and the people. The history of some of the people we got have been with their former employer for 15 years. It's taken a lot of years to get stable people.
was a small company when I started, and now it's very large and has expanded into many other different operations.
Silver Bay has been a real good company for me to work with. They're fair and treat me real well.
Company's real good to work for. Dick and Betty's real nice. They have a good company. They run a safe company. And they do an awful lot for the men that works for them.
It's really been a good company, and I'm proud to be part of it.
Silver Bay is unusual because it's the many different types of things we do. It's, you know, we do everything to keep the company running.
Today, we use wood products in every aspect of our lives, from clothing to medicine, and even ice cream, believe it or not. Wood and wood pulp products play a vital role in our society. We can't do without it.